Let me set the stage for you. You're a young kid, and the coolest thing in the world to you are video games. It's like a place where you get to do things you usually wouldn't be able to do. At every opportunity you get, you waste no time to get yourself to turn on the TV, put on two of your favorite games on your PlayStation 2, and spend all day playing them. There's two in particular that you're fond of, Gran Turismo 3 and Need for Speed Carbon, and they are both awesome. You love Gran Turismo because it has the oval-shaped track just like your favorite movie Cars, and you love Need for Speed Carbon for taking place in open cities as well as having cops, which is something you've never seen before. The hours you'd sink into these games are endless, playing your favorite events or favorite tracks with the cars that you love most. Maybe you don't know the cars by name, but you know their colors, their styling, their shapes, and all of it combined with the cool music, awesome environments, and the fact that racing feels just as cool as the movies or shows you've watched made it seem. This is why these games are your favorites. You love them, and you always will. They are your baseline, the role model for other games to follow, and for that, they are your virtual playground of choice. And you wouldn't have it be any other way. And you didn't have any other way. For a long time. But you never cared. You never thought about there being other ways. They are still your favorites. But one day, all of that changes. A visit to a family member's house happens and you're asked if you want to try playing a game. Knowing of what lies ahead, you accept. But the moment you're able to lay your eyes on what's happening, you notice that you don't know anything. In fact, you don't know shit. And your world is going to get shaken by a revolution that you never even knew happened. You brace yourself, and the stage is finally set.
Welcome to Motorstorm.
I wanna take you on a roller coaster.
To say that this game had made a strong impression on little me would be the understatement of the century. It's not just that it's a great game, because it is, but when that's combined with being shown stuff that you never even considered before, is when it goes from something special to the player to something revolutionary for the player's mind. And for today's video, I'll revisit why Motorstorm blew my mind all of those years back in detail to convincingly show why this game is as special as it is. There's a lot of things that are good, but I will explain the things that, looking back, were what blew me away the most back then. And those would be the tracks, the visual elements, and the driving. We will go through each, starting with the tracks. Motorstorm's tracks were way different in comparison to the other games I grew up with, and that's even if we completely discarded thinking of the environments. It has a very different goal in mind for what it wants to achieve with its tracks, and not only does it push really creatively done tracks for one, but due to its philosophy it allows for each race, even if it's on the same car or track, to be different. I'll explain, and from here onward, I'll use the previously mentioned games Gran Turismo 3 and Need for Speed Carbon as a baseline, since that is what I knew most at the time. Gran Turismo 3's tracks are very by the book, you could say, if you compare them to Motorstorm. Which is to say that they're not especially outlandish, but given the game Gran Turismo wants to be, that's not really a bad thing, not at all. They tend to lend themselves more toward a realistic type of racing due to the game's focus on being more of a simulator, so in that sense, they tend to be as you'd expect. Due to its realistic focus, Gran Turismo is bound to be more rigid than some other games, but within that rigidness, it makes tracks that are very memorable for their layout alone, and that's a sign of a well-made track. For the other side of the coin, we have Need for Speed Carbon. It's very different in its case because it's an open world rather than a closed track racer, so its tracks being good depends more on whether or not the map is well designed, and I believe that it absolutely is. It usually lends itself toward more intense racing, with more elevation changes, where traffic may be involved and shortcuts may be available, which can both be detrimental or beneficial to your race. Due to Carbon's open world design, the roads in which you race tend to be not as chained to aim at realism as much as Gran Turismo, and so it can have more opportunities to have more interesting scenarios. Like for example, taking shortcuts through blocked off spaces, making jumps, and smashing through obstacles. At the end of the day, you're still navigating a course that the game decides for you, but there's more to consider at once because of the less boxed in nature that allows for more gameplay opportunities. And then there's Motorstorm, which says fuck all that and does something completely different. It's not open world like Carbon, but it has tracks that are much bigger with a lot more jumps, significantly more elevation changes, but most importantly, different pathways. And I say different pathways intentionally, because while there's a ton of different paths, there's not exactly one I can think of as a shortcut, and it's for one simple reason. The game has a ton of different vehicle classes ranging from dirt bikes to big rigs, and these all have very different properties that make them unique. For instance, bikes and rally cars are very nimble vehicles, but they're very hard to control in the mud. Meanwhile, vehicles like mud pluggers and big rigs are less agile but do better in that type of terrain. And then you have the buggy, which can do well on any terrain type but doesn't really specialize in anything. And the game's way of balancing this is by having different paths geared toward different vehicle types that take into account their strengths and weaknesses. For example, there's a mud-filled path for the big rigs and mud pluggers, which is very simple and takes them straight forward to where they need to be. Meanwhile, the rally cars and dirt bikes get their own paths. However, these can be more complicated, and so despite their obvious strength and agility, the complexity difference between their paths allows for parity between classes. That's very good design, but the best thing about the game is that despite having paths meant for specific classes, it never forces you into going somewhere. If you're on a dirt bike and you want to go through the mud, even if you suck at it, you can do it. If you're a big rig and you want to go through one of the more narrower paths for rally cars, you can also do it. You can take whatever path you want and the game becomes all the better thanks to this freedom of choice regarding where you go. And it leads to fun challenges and some very funny and cool moments too. In short, wherever you can sensibly drive to, you can also drive through. And that freedom is part of the reason why the tracks were mind-blowing to me and still hold up today. I had never seen anything so vast before, and the various paths that you can take makes the tracks feel fresh every single time I play. And it's awesome. Secondly, we have the visual element. And, well, okay, of course the bump in fidelity alone would have amazed my younger self. The vehicles look amazing, so do the tracks, and visual effects like smoke and parts flying off your car as you crash or explode look awesome. But here I want to talk about more specific things that the fidelity improvement brought to the table that always stuck with me. And firstly, it's how your car visibly changes the more you drive. At the time, and even still today, I am still a big fan of just how your car gets dirty and dirtier over time in ways that felt convincing. The paint would show signs of wear, the colors would start to fade as the dust around you keeps piling on your car, and it's not just a subtle difference, it's very clear. But then there's also the mud, which is probably one of the best looking parts of the game for me. And I don't know, maybe call me a graphics whore, but seeing the mud fly into the air, splash on the screen like it's a pair of goggles that you're wearing, and visibly pile over your car as well, it was pretty crazy to see. And alongside that, a detail that I also appreciate is how the mud obviously looks like mud, and how it behaves. The whole game takes place in dirty environments, but mud-filled roads look way shinier than normal dirt. And while we covered how mud flies into the air as you drive on it, I didn't mention how it leaves visible tire tracks, and ones that actually look like they've been modifying the terrain, just like how it would be on actual mud. Small details like these mean a lot to me, and I like it enough to where even if the vehicle I'm driving isn't particularly good in the mud, I willingly go into it just to see the effect. Am I weird for that? Maybe, but still it's awesome. But another reason why I'm also so fond of this game's visuals are due to the environments. Some people may find that a little odd because that's one of the main criticisms against the first Motorstorm, but I feel that no game, even within its own franchise, explored a type of environment like the Rocky Mesa quite like the first one did. It takes this kind of biome, to put a word to it, and it gives it a Motorstorm type look, with structures and bridges looking that they've been haphazardly built. Big screens showing the player's camera, totaled cars thrown about, and even more lazily done structures. In short, it's like a festival for crazy ass drivers, and that shows with how these tracks were visually designed. And I think it really shows how the great work from the artists paid off when even I, as a kid, felt this whenever I got the chance to play, which wasn't that many times. And the last thing I'd like to mention also involves audio, and it's the crashing of your car. In the other racing games I played growing up, while crashes are possible, they feel very wimpy. Sometimes it's hilarious to see cars get moved around like pinballs, but beyond that, not much really happens. Except your glass getting cracked and paint becoming damaged in Need for Speed Carbon. Meanwhile, in Motorstorm, not only does your car visibly get wear and tear on it in very convincing ways, but it gives crashes an insane level of spectacle by comparison. I'll show you. The way the audio from everything else abruptly cuts, you only hear the explosion of your car, and the game goes in slow motion as you see your torn vehicle react to whatever just happened in the form of a fiery explosion. It's not just that it's cool how much was put into it, but the fact that it makes every crash feel so much weightier too. You can also force an explosion by boosting too much, which causes overheating, which brings us to how Motorstorm's driving is so different. What makes Motorstorm driving so different can be divided into a few things, mainly how the vehicles are inherently floaty, how reactive they are to the environment, and the boost. But let's begin with the boost first, as it's extremely important and vital to the gameplay. Whereas other games have the boost as a resource that depletes a gauge, Motorstorm does things a little differently. You have an empty bar with the label boost under it, and the way it works is that the more you boost, the more it fills up. What this bar signifies though is your engine heat. If you boost for too long, it will have different effects like leaving a line of fire behind your car, which just kinda looks cool. But it'll also shake the gauge aggressively and make a very high pitched noise. If you ignore it and keep boosting, your engine explodes and it'll send your car flying. First off, that's cool and also funny. But secondly, and even cooler and funnier, the explosion propels your car's body forward, and in this game, if your body makes it through the finish line, that counts as a finish, no matter if you're driving or if you're wrecked, which means that this can actually be used to clutch out wins if you need an extra bit of speed before the finish. So yes, blowing yourself up is a strat in this game. I think that says enough. But really, it's both cool and funny how the detrimental aspect of boosting too much can be used to your advantage, and it was 100% done on purpose. That, and the amount of freedom that you get with how much you use it, is why boosting is so awesome. But let's move on to the vehicles, mainly their floatiness. Let's use the previously mentioned games as a baseline, that being Need for Speed Carbon and Gran Turismo 3. Cars in these games are extremely heavy in the sense that cars tend to really just stick to the ground most of the time. In Carbon, there are concepts such as jumps and the like, so your car isn't necessarily being magnetized toward the ground, but most of the time they're basically glued there. Especially in the face of a crash, unless it's from an extremely strong impact, and I mean horrifically strong, your car will kinda just stop upon impact. Maybe its rear will go up a bit or some other part of its body, but really that's the most that's going to happen in most cases. Hell, in Gran Turismo 3 you can't even flip your car no matter how much you try it, which kinda puts into perspective how stiff the cars are in this aspect. Meanwhile, in Motorstorm, every single elevation change is felt. Your car will react accordingly to just about most irregularities with the terrain. Depending on how you land on a piece of terrain, your car might bounce in a certain direction, which sounds normal, but that's what's impressive, because physics that were reactive in this way weren't something I ever got to see before Motorstorm. If I were to put it in short, other racing games I played beforehand had the player car feel like moving a brick in terms of physics. Whereas in Motorstorm, your car feels like an actual physics-driven object, and while that sounds like a simple change, it's one that really does affect the entire driving model, because it introduces a whole new dimension to the driving that truly did make it unique for me. And I want to stress the fact that this doesn't mean I'm calling the games I'm using as a baseline, Gran Turismo 3 and Need for Speed Carbon, bad. Not at all, they're still some of my favorite games, and despite their quirks, they each hold their own in their own way. But they were the racing games that I was able to play as I grew up, so they're the games that I had to go off of. And Motorstorm was just so different that it was genuinely an eye-opening experience for me. I hope I've made it evident as to why Motorstorm left such a huge impression on me as a kid. as well as why it's giving me so many childhood memories.